Did you know that in some parts of the American South, enslaved people outnumbered free people? Or that some slave owners rented out the people they enslaved like we rent out apartments today? The story of slavery in the United States is far more complex and shocking than what most of us learn in school. Today, we're diving deep into the realities they never mentioned, the hidden histories that paint a much fuller and, frankly, more horrifying picture. This isn't just about dates and names. It's about understanding the human experience behind one of America's greatest sins. Welcome to HistorYo, where we uncover the past you thought you knew. Let's start with a common misconception: that all enslaved people worked on large cotton plantations. While cotton was king, especially after the invention of the cotton gin, the lives of the enslaved were incredibly diverse. Many were forced to work in cities as blacksmiths, carpenters, and domestic servants. In places like Charleston and New Orleans, a system known as hiring out was common. An owner could lease an enslaved person to someone else for a day, a week, or even a year. This practice shattered families and communities, as people could be sent miles away at a moment's notice. It also meant that many urban businesses, not just plantations, were built on the foundation of slave labor. Imagine walking down the street and seeing people being advertised for rent, just like tools or property. That was the reality. Another dark aspect was the internal slave trade. After the international slave trade was outlawed in 1808, the demand for labor in the Deep South skyrocketed. This created a massive, forced migration within the United States. Over 1 million enslaved people were torn from their homes in the Upper South, states like Virginia and Maryland, and sold down the river to the brutal cotton and sugar plantations of Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. This journey was traumatic. People were marched hundreds of miles in chained groups called or packed onto steamships in horrendous conditions. Families were deliberately broken apart. Parents were sold away from children and husbands from wives. This wasn't an unfortunate side effect. It was a deliberate business strategy to maximize profit and break the will of the enslaved. Slave traders were some of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the South, their fortunes built on human misery. Now, let's talk about the economics of it all. Slavery wasn't just a social system, it was the engine of the American economy. By 1860, the 4 million enslaved people in the US were collectively valued at over $3 billion. To put that in perspective, that was more than all the factories, railroads, and banks in the entire country combined. Enslaved people were the single largest financial asset in the United States. This wealth wasn't confined to the South. Northern banks financed plantations. New York insurance companies sold policies on enslaved lives. New England textile mills spun cotton picked by enslaved hands. The entire nation was complicit and profited from this system of exploitation. When we talk about the legacy of slavery, it's not just a Southern issue, it's a deeply American one, woven into the very fabric of the nation's economic development. The brutality of slavery is often sanitized. We hear about whipping, but the reality was a system of constant, calculated terror. It wasn't just random acts of cruelty, it was a management technique. Beyond the whip, there were iron collars with bells, elaborate shackles, and branding. Psychological torture was relentless. The constant threat of being sold and separated from loved ones was a powerful tool of control. Slave patrols, which were essentially the first form of organized policing in the South, terrorized black communities, enforcing curfews and brutally suppressing any hint of dissent. Their job was to instill fear and maintain the racial hierarchy at all costs. This system of state-sanctioned violence has echoes that reverberate through American history, long after emancipation. But in the face of this unimaginable oppression, there was incredible resistance. And it wasn't just about large-scale rebellions like Nat Turner's, though those were critically important. Resistance was an everyday act. It was feigning illness to slow down work. It was intentionally breaking tools. It was learning to read and write in secret, a crime punishable by severe beating or worse. It was creating a vibrant culture in the slave quarters, with music, stories, and religious practices that affirmed their humanity. Spirituals often contained hidden messages about escape or meetings, and of course, there was the ultimate act of resistance. Escaping. The Underground Railroad is famous, but thousands of individuals made the perilous journey to freedom on their own, guided by the North Star and an unshakable desire to be free. These acts of defiance, big and small, showed the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. What about the end of slavery? The Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment officially ended it, but freedom was a far cry from equality. The period of Reconstruction was a brief, hopeful moment where black men could vote and hold office, but it was quickly crushed by a violent backlash. Systems like sharecropping trapped many formerly enslaved people in a cycle of debt and poverty, working the same land for their former masters under conditions that were slavery in all but name. Discriminatory laws known as black codes were passed to control the labor and behavior of African Americans. The rise of terrorist groups like the Ku Klux Klan unleashed a wave of terror to reassert white supremacy. The promise of 40 acres and a mule was never fulfilled, leaving millions without the economic foundation needed to build a new life. The end of slavery was not the end of the struggle. So why is it crucial to understand these harsh realities? Because the legacy of slavery is not in the distant past. It shaped modern America. The economic disparities, the systematic racism in housing and justice, and the ongoing struggle for civil rights are all direct descendants of this history. When we gloss over the brutal economic engine of slavery, the trauma of the domestic slave trade, and the violent suppression that followed emancipation, we fail to understand the present. The history of slavery is not just black history. It is American history, and we couldn't move forward to a more just future without honestly confronting the darkest parts of our past. It's a heavy topic, but an essential one. Learning this history isn't about guilt. It's about knowledge and understanding. It's about honoring the millions of people who suffered, resisted, and survived. It's about recognizing the deep roots of the issues we still face today. What part of this history shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And if you believe in the power of history to illuminate the present, make sure to like this video and subscribe to HistorYo for more deep dives into the past. Thanks for watching.